Esta es mi playa, este es mi sol. Esta es mi tierra y esta soy yo. That is a quote from Benito Ocasio, otherwise known as the international Puerto Rican reggaeton superstar Bad Bunny, who also happens to be one of the biggest advocates for the awareness of the displacement of native Puerto Ricans from Puerto Rico. Now, for those who don't know, Puerto Rico is an island located in the part of the Caribbean called the Greater Antilles. Puerto Rico's culture is a colorful tapestry of old and new, mixing indigenous, Spanish, and African traditions. You'll find expressions of that culture all around the island, from vibrant murals to music festivals that fill the streets. According to the 2002 World Values and Happiness Survey, the island's sandy beaches, lush rainforests, close-knit families, and endless celebrations were home to some of the happiest people in the world. But over the last decade, there has been a huge displacement of native Puerto Ricans from Puerto Rico because of things such as harsh weather, lack of government aid, and colonialization. It is through spreading awareness and having more people be aware of what's going on in Puerto Rico, rather than just seeing it as their next potential vacation spot, that will help shed light on the situation. I'm Puerto Rican myself, and my mom's side of the family actually came here years ago after being displaced due to some of the exact reasons I will be discussing. Now, first, with Puerto Rico being an island in the Caribbean, it's no shock that the weather won't be sunshine and rainbows every day. But what most don't realize is that the weather can actually be life-threatening. For example, 5 years ago, on September 20th, 2017, Hurricane Maria, a Category 5 storm, hit Puerto Rico, leaving unimaginable damage in its wake. Puerto Ricans went months without water, power, or adequate shelter as a result. Thousands of Puerto Ricans died. Long after the storm subsided, the number of fatalities actually continued to rise as a result of secondary issues created by post-hurricane conditions, such as not having access to clean drinking water. Another major issue caused by the extreme weather is the loss of power. After Maria, some municipalities on the island went an entire year without power. Without any power, people are forced to rely on unreliable backup generators that require expensive diesel fuel to operate, making them inaccessible to many. In over over four in total, over 4,000 Puerto Ricans died in the aftermath of Maria, which is one of the largest storms that has hit the island in the recent decade. But nearly every year, there are a number of smaller hurricanes and tropical storms that parade the island, each causing their own problems. Interestingly enough, many of the victims of Hurricane Maria and the other storms whose lives were lost were not victims of the storms themselves, but of the lack of government aid. For example, around 2 years after Maria, tens of thousands of water bottles issued by FEMA were found abandoned in fields, unopened, and never having been distributed to those that so desperately needed them. But the lack of government aid and disregard for the natives by the government is not an uncommon occurrence in Puerto Rico. The government in Puerto Rico is different than the one we have here in the US, even though it is a US territory. The island is a self-governing commonwealth, being led by the governor Pedro Pierluisi, the Speaker of the House Rafael Tatito Hernandez, and the President of the Senate Jose Luis Dalmal Santiago. During the last decade, the government has closed over 600 schools on the small island, evicted hundreds of native Puerto Ricans, and this is due to the government being enticed by privatization from Americans coming to the island and purchasing land and the lucrative benefits it offers to the few government officials through the profits they receive from the Americans investing in the island. So they close schools and evict natives to make room for the Americans. In a recent interview with one of these government officials, the Speaker of the House, Rafael Tatito Hernandez, pictured here, is asked from Bianca Grelao, an investigative news journalist based in Puerto Rico, where she says, people see it as the government taking resources away from them and serving them on a silver platter for people with lots of money. Do you see it that way? To which Mr. Hernandez responds, yes, of course.
Ellos ven que el gobierno está quitándoles recursos para ponérselos en bandeja de plata a la gente que tiene mucho dinero. ¿Usted no lo ve así?
Sí, no hay duda.
Americans buy property in Puerto Rico to build things such as vacation rentals and Airbnbs in which they rent out to tourists for 10 times the price a native would regularly be paying for monthly rent. A decent amount of this profit goes to the government officials, as pictured here, for which they use to fund their campaigns and to remain in power. In order for the government officials to be able to obtain the rental profits, they sell the land on which the homes and apartments of natives reside on. So they evict the natives and serve them with 30-day eviction notices in order to make room for the Americans. This leaves the natives no choice but to either find somewhere else to move within 30 days, become homeless, or be displaced to the U.S. mainland. Pictured here is Maricosa Hernandez, who was suddenly served a 30-day eviction notice after living in Santurce, Puerto Rico for over 25 years. Now, what draws the attention of the Americans and makes them want to purchase the rental properties is one of the next biggest causes of displacement. In order to draw the Americans to Puerto Rico, the government of the island produced laws that allow for tax breaks, capital gain benefits, and maximum real estate investment opportunities to Americans who come to the island to invest and purchase property. Here is a short clip from a documentary filmed in Puerto Rico, further explaining colonialism on the island.
I'm moving to Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
It's like the only place you can live with 0% capital gains.
Actualmente hay más de 3,000 personas que se benefician de esta ley. Ese beneficio, sumado a los bajos precios de las propiedades luego del huracán María, para algunos significó una oportunidad.
Puerto Rico is an absolute gold mine for real estate investing.
Oh my gosh, tax advantages.
Hi, Puerto Rico is the best place for you to buy real estate in 2022.
Now, the government officials of Puerto Rico receive profits from these Americans coming to the island, but not only does it cause the eviction of natives from their homes, as we discussed, but even more pressing, colonialism has created an economic crisis in Puerto Rico, further contributing to the displacement. The levels of debt in Puerto Rico have become unattainable as the tax advantages used to entice Americans have crippled the economy, along with monetary mismanagement and excessive borrowing. Economic growth on the island fell by roughly 12.5% overall between 2004 and 2020, while Puerto Rico's population shrunk by more than 16%. It has also struggled under a large public debt in recent years, totaling about $70 billion. In May, the island declared bankruptcy, becoming the largest municipal bankruptcy debt in U.S. history. The federal court confirmed a plan that reduced Puerto Rico's debt by 80%, but without any strategic change from government officials to deal with colonialization and mismanagement, the debt is predicted to continue accumulating once more. It is the accumulation of the constant berating of the island from Mother Nature to the lack of government support and the encouraged colonialism that has caused major displacement and the native population to shrink by almost 20%, as I mentioned earlier, within the last 2 decades. For me and the rest of us Puerto Ricans who call the island our home, it is through spreading awareness and informing people on what is happening on the island, through things as simple as giving this speech that we hope will shed light on the problems and will help prevent what us natives fear most, a Puerto Rico without Puerto Ricans.